But there's a lot of upsides from remote work. I mean, the main one is obviously that you don't have to spend an hour or two of your time every day, commuting, whether that be driving in or sitting on a train or on a bus. And funny enough, I had to drive 40 minutes somewhere the other day, and I was really sitting there going, wow, this takes a long time. Like, there's a large chunk of my day, 40 minutes there and 40 minutes back. So
welcome to the first episode of Remote Tech People, the podcast. Today's episode, we've got Brendan Yell, who's the director of Twilio Startups. Welcome, Brendan.
Hi, James. Great to be with you.
Those are the listeners that don't know who you are. Mate, can you give us a bit of an overview of, who is Brendan Yell and what is Brendan Yell currently working on?
Yeah, sure. So I currently work for a US-based tech company called Twilio. Twilio allows you to bolt in things like SMS and voice and email into the apps and websites that you build. And I run their startup program. So we're a really small team. There's just 3 of us globally, and we're globally distributed in New York, London, and I suppose I'm technically sort of based out of Sydney. Yeah, look, COVID has accelerated all forms of digital transformation, of which remote work is kind of one of them. It was only a couple of years ago I was telling someone that QR codes are dead. It's terrible technology. It's hard to use. And now my mother, who's in her senior years, has no problem using a QR code. My 10-year-old was on a Zoom call this morning. So I agree with you. It was going to happen anyway, but it's really kind of accelerated that. I think what's interesting for our team, and our job is really to get around and work with startups, is that we're actually doing a better job doing it remotely. I used to spend way too much time in airports, way too much time on planes, way too much time exhausted and tired, feeling that I needed to go and have cups of coffee with these people, with these startups. Now I jump on Zoom calls with them, and we actually are doing a much better job. And we're servicing startups that are not only in San Francisco and New York and in Sydney, but also companies that are in Vietnam and Malaysia and India and places that we wouldn't get to as often. So, if I look at it, us being a remote team, we're actually doing a better job serving the startups, which is what our job as a team is to do. But there's a lot of upsides from remote work. I mean, the main one is obviously that you don't have to spend an hour or two of your time every day, commuting, whether that be driving in or sitting on a train or on a bus. And funny enough, I had to drive 40 minutes somewhere the other day, and I was really sitting there going, wow, this takes a long time. Like, there's a large chunk of my day, 40 minutes there and 40 minutes back. So, I think that aspect of it is a real advantage. And then that gives you some flexibility to hopefully keep a really nice work-life balance.
Yeah, I think that culture piece is a big piece. I think companies that had moved to remote before COVID and had put things in place, put structures in place, whether it be those regular meetups or the big gatherings, companies that were prepared for that and have got those things in place have had success, and companies that have moved to remote because of COVID and had to do it reactively maybe don't have those cultural pieces in place yet and are trying to reactively come up to speed with that. That's where they may face challenges. But I agree. I think over time, this remote work is here to stay, and the cultural piece will be figured out. There's more and more organizations and SaaS-based companies that are trying to fill that gap where building culture remotely is a thing. And I think that is definitely a space that will continue to grow. Mate, you mentioned a point earlier, which is quite contentious. I know it's been a bit of a bigger conversation in the US in particular, is that salary parity. San Francisco, there are a lot of salaries there were obviously extremely high, becoming extremely competitive. The move to remote, people moving out of the area, do they continue to get paid San Fran salaries? If you hire somebody on the East Coast versus West Coast, are they on different salaries? If you hire somebody in Australia versus the US, again, are they on different salaries? And I think that conversation is a continual one. Do you have any opinion or advice in and around that salary parity?
Yeah, look, we've certainly experienced that at Twilio, and it's a really good point to discuss. And I think as a company, you need to have a policy on it. So we have, like most companies, we have different pay grades within Twilio, and if you are located in one of the cities that is deemed to have a loading on it, and San Francisco is one of those, then you can. Your salary might be up to 25% higher than what it would be if you're in a different location. During COVID, of course, we had like tons of employees kind of not just flee San Francisco, but flee California. So I did say we actually had an email go out and said that your pay may be adjusted based on your location because it was, I suppose, artificially or inflated before. We had situations where managers were not being as paid as much as people that were reporting to them because the people that were reporting to them were in San Francisco and the managers were not. So it's a tricky one. We also had it go the other way where we actually had employees leave because their salary was adjusted when they went back to Idaho. So it's an interesting discussion. I think you have to, as a company, need to figure that out. It's easier when you're hiring someone new to go, this is the salary because you are in Denver, Colorado, or this is the salary because you're in Idaho, or you're on where I am in Lake Macquarie in New South Wales. What's harder is that adjustment from moving from, you used to be able to come into the office, but now you can just sit up there in Lake Macquarie. You don't have to come to Sydney anymore. Like that's the tricky conversation to have because no one wants to go backwards in salary. So when you're first hiring new people, I think that conversation can be easy. But transitioning, I think, it's fraught. And I don't know if all of our employees were pay adjusted that went back to different regions. I think some were not. So I think it was a tricky conversation. I think the first time I transferred out of an office and started working from home, if I was not in the mood to work, I used to just still sit at my desk. And I had to suddenly realize that there was no one looking over my shoulder. And, if I wasn't in that mood, then, go for a walk, take the dog for a walk, take yourself for a walk, do some exercise, go hit some golf balls, whatever that is, and come back in that zone where you're going to be productive. Where before in an office environment, you wouldn't really do that. You wouldn't just go for a walk and go, I'm not really in the mood today. But you just sit at your desk. Now that desk time is non-productive. And all it is really kind of their kind of vain metrics. Oh, I saw Brendan was at his desk all day today, but I didn't actually do anything because I wasn't in the right frame of mind. So that was probably the first thing that I learned from remote working was if you're not feeling it, if you're not in that productive zone, then don't sit at your desk. Go and do something else. Now, I find that I'm really productive between sort of 7 and 10 in the morning, and then things seem to slow down after that. I don't know why. I'm a night owl, but I'm not productive at night. So I find my brain is operating fastest early in the morning, and that's what I try and do to take advantage of that time. And, some of my work days, I'm done by 12 o'clock, by 2 o'clock. That's fine. If you feel like you've been productive for those 6 hours that you put in, like that day that you were doing 2x what you normally would, that's fine to take that afternoon off. I would say that we are going to get judged more on productivity and less on these kind of vanity metrics of, was Brendan logged into Slack all day?
Roles like yours isn't a pick pack where you'll fill X amount of boxes in X amount of hours. If you do 2 really productive hours versus sitting at your desk for 8 hours unproductively, you take those two productive hours every day of the week, right? Yeah,
look, that's a big shift in thinking for a lot of people that they're judged purely on output and not on hours. So it's a tricky thing for employees to deal with and get their head around. It's a tricky thing for managers and employers as well to get their head around. And sometimes, some days I will take Fridays pretty much off, but I might do a couple of hours on a Saturday morning. So again, that flexibility and productivity, look, I think the trade-off's awesome, and I wouldn't kind of have it any other way. And I kind of, I laugh when I think about years ago when I was working at Optus, and I would put my suit on at 7:30 in the morning, and I'd head on in on the bus, and I'd get in there, and I'd have a chat to people at the coffee machine, and sit there, and then 5 o'clock, boom, off I'd go, and then I wasn't online any of those hours. I was uncontactable, which is sort of a good thing. Like you do have to choose your hours when you switch off, but that work environment from 20 years ago, it seems very distant and foreign to me now.
Is there anything else that you found super productive for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, at Twilio, we use all the Google suite. So it's called Google Workplace now. So things like Google Drive, I think just make it very, very easy. If you don't want to use Zoom, I mean, Google Meet, which is their video product, is good enough. Like, and then, for whatever it is, $5.99 a month per user, it's a very, encompassing kind of suite of tools. Slack, I don't know if I'm the biggest lover of Slack. Shout out to Cal, the co-founder of Slack, who's a mate of mine. But, I think you'll learn how to use it. We use threads a lot. You don't want your Slack messages to be these long kind of just pages of notes. So we divide everything into topics, and then we do threads off that. So that's probably an important one. We use email a little bit internally, but mostly for external communications. That's probably about it. I mean, I think it would vary on depending on your setup and kind of what you do. But if you were to start off with something like Google Workplace, I think that's a pretty encompassing kind of suite of tools. But again, if you can get the hardware that you need, I think everything else kind of goes from there. We use some other like note-taking tools as well as a bunch of different ones there now. I mean, there's a tool for everything if you've got a use case for something. So yeah, whether it be like Post-its or whatever. I use for task management. I use Trello. So Trello kind of matches the way I kind of think with little sort of task boards. So Trello, now owned by Atlassian, I think is a great tool for that. But yeah, I think you'll find that there's industry even specific tools for pretty much everything you want to do.
Perfect. Mate, appreciate your time today.
Cool. Thanks, James. Great to chat as always.
Thanks, Brendan. Cheers, mate. Bye.